Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be teaching you the basic geography and history of Saint Lucia. And as you can see, it is a very tiny little island here in the Windward Islands. And I do have my Windward Islands book. I promise I'll zoom out at the end of the history lesson. We'll flip through this and I'll read just the parts about St. Lucia to you to give you some relaxing page turning and my gentle voice reading to you at the end of the video. But I have some exciting news for anyone who's been subscribed to my channel for a while because I've talked before that I've been atlas shopping because for these tiny countries, let me get my trusty pencil. I really want to show off the geography of these little tiny countries, and I can't really do that with this atlas that I've had for about 8-9 years now. It's a very good atlas, but not so good for a small country like St. Lucia. So I finally caved and bought a new atlas, and I get to show it off starting with St. Lucia. So let's put this away and look at this. Ta-da! Now that's what I'm talking about. This is St. Lucia. Let me put this book away. Ooh. St. Lucia. Let's talk about its geography. So, there we go. Okay. And let's set the Windward Islands over here. Okay. St. Lucia. Here it is. What you kind of can't really see over here is all of the tiny little islands off of the coast. It has quite a lot. But St. Lucia is a volcanic island, just like all the islands in the Windward Islands chain. Mount Jimmy right here is its tallest point. It is an active volcano. But its most famous landmark mountains are the Pitons, the Petit Piton and the Grand Piton. They're cinder cone volcanoes, or what I like to call cartoon volcanoes, like you would see in like a cartoon, or like if you asked a child to draw a picture of a volcano, that's what they would draw, like a very basic shaped volcano. They're very close together. So it's a very famous landmark and a point of pride for St. Lucians. And St. Lucia is very forested and very mountainous. And I'll mention it at the end of the history, but St. Lucia is very tourist driven nowadays, mostly because they do have very beautiful beaches, but they are creating lots of very interesting tourist, I wouldn't say tourist traps, but tourist experiences, because they're very unique. For instance, they have a drive-through volcano. They have really beautiful like mud springs and hot springs and things like that, because it is an active volcanic island, probably the most active out of all the Windward Islands. View Fort down here is actually where their international airport is. So they've been working on building up this town into making it much more tourist friendly and building more tourist activities, whereas Castries is their capital, so that there are more destinations around the island for people to experience St. Lucia and all of its splendor. This area over here, it's very densely forested, so there's also lots of experiences around there, and there's just a lot of places to go around and see. For example, where is it? I think it's in Cul-de-sac, which is around here, I believe. It's around here somewhere. My cat he's trying to wind down and go to sleep, but around here they actually filmed part of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie on St. Lucia. So the Black Pearl ship is actually docked on this island, and you can go visit it. So yeah, there's lots of different experiences to see on St. Lucia. So very beautiful island. I loved looking up, like I've said before, I like to look up tourist videos, vacation videos. And they like to target like honeymoons and couples, things like that. So they've built a lot of romantic experiences on St. Lucia as well. So it's a stunningly beautiful island. Let's look into its history, because its history is so interesting. I know I say that for every country, but St. Lucia was a wild ride. Let's just get right into it. St. Lucia, by the way, because I like to talk about the names of each country, is the only country in the world that's named after a woman. St. Lucy, obviously. Ireland is debatable because it's named after an Irish goddess, Ire. But, St. Lucy was an actual person. So it's the only land in the world that's actually named after a for reals person. So, my notes right here, just double checking. Yeah, and then the name St. Lucia first appeared, because it went by many different names, but St. Lucia first appeared on a globe in the Vatican in 1520 when it went by the name Sancta Lucia. But the native peoples on here called it many different names, mostly names having to do with iguanas. The first people to settle the island were the Arawaks, and they lived on the island first around the year like 200 to 400. The Arawak peoples came from South America. They're most notably known for living on Hispaniola. But they did live on this island temporarily. The Caribs came in the year 1800. The Caribs, from what I've read from all the different islands they lived on, were particularly violent people. They attacked and killed a lot of the Arawak people, so they were killed or fled the island not long after that, and the Caribs settled the island and lived there for many, many, many years. The first European to technically settle on the island was a French pirate named Francois Leclerc, or his pirate name was Jean de Bois. He went by that name because he was the first pirate to ever have a peg leg. And he and his crew of about 300 or so settled on Pigeon Island, which was, it used to be around here. It's not an island anymore because they built a land bridge connecting it to the main island. And he settled there so he could raid Spanish ships passing by. So technically that was the first European settler on the island. And then technically the first colony, the first actual settlers, was in 1605. An English ship blew off course. It was heading for Guyana in South America, and they landed on the island. And they agreed with the Caribs there to stay for a bit. There were 67 colonists at first. By the time they fled, there were only 19 left, because like I said, the Caribs are just a particularly violent people. They will attack when provoked, and rightly so. I think they knew not to make too many agreements with these strange people from across the ocean. So if you know my videos, if you've seen, the Grenada video, the who else? Myanmar, Sri Lanka. I just did the Gambia. If you stayed awake long enough to get to those parts, you would know that Britain and France hate each other a lot, quite a lot. From the beginning of the creation of France and Britain until World War I, they can't stand each other and are extremely petty and will do everything they can to try to one-up each other. And they call St. Lucia the Helen of the Caribbean. And if you know the story of Helen of Troy, she was considered the most beautiful woman to have ever existed, and wars were fought over her beauty. So Saint Lucia was considered, the Helen. Wars were fought over her beauty. So if we look, let me pull up the Windward Islands map here. So let me see if this will show you. Oh, good. So I know it's really zoomed in. I'm sorry. So France had Martinique, right? And Britain had Barbados. And right in the middle is, St. Vincent. That's also another story. St. Lucia. There we go. Martinique and Barbados. There's St. Lucia. So, and what they were doing on these islands was growing sugar on sugar plantations, and they were extremely profitable. So they wanted St. Lucia to get more sugar plantations. And they wanted it very, very much. So in 1635, Britain and France both made claims to the island separately, but in the same year, which is a problem. So it became a race to who's going to set up the colonies first. And France was the first to arrive. They started building forts around the island. And they had to chase off a lot of English invasions and, of course, fight with the native Carib tribes to lay claim to the island. But they did let the Dutch build a little redoubt on the island because they're petty like that. So the English had the great idea to sneak on and make a deal with the Caribs, and they led a full invasion force along with the Caribs and fought against the French to take over the island. In 1664, the English made claim to St. Lucia. They chased the French off the island, started building, colonies, and were doing really well until they started dying from disease in great numbers. Most of them had to go back to England to recover, try not to die. So France came right back. In 1666, the French West India Company laid claim to the island, and it became a French crown colony in 1674. Then, and I should have researched this a little better, because it seems kind of random. In 1722, George I, seemingly out of the blue, I should have looked into this more, he granted the rights to the island to this duke. And he assigned this merchant to sail to the island and set up a colony. And he did. And he set up a colony called Petit Carenage. And the French chased them off. It was not successful. Then the 7 Years' War happened, which was quite a lot of turmoil in Europe. But basically, the French and British, at any chance they get, stole a lot of territory in the Caribbean, in Southeast Asia, in Europe, anywhere they could. And that included St. Lucia. Britain came in and took it. But when they signed the Treaty of Paris in 1763, they gave it back. When the American Revolution happened, I guess they thought, well, we have warships over in that part of the world anyway. Let's head down to St. Lucia and nab it back. In 1788, Britain came and took the island. And I suppose gave it back at some point. I didn't write when they had to give it back, but they definitely did. So, not long after that was the French Revolution. So, in 1791, some French revolutionaries came down with some pamphlets about, liberté, égalité, fraternité, started distributing it around the island. Now, I should point out that every time someone came in and took over, someone else came back and took it again, they were building sugar plantations. And you need two kinds of people to establish a sugar plantation. One is a white guy to run it, and then you need a lot of kidnapped African people to work as slaves on that plantation. And you need a lot more kidnapped African people than you need a white guy to run the plantation, right? So at this point, 1791, there are thousands of people of African descent on this island. Either people directly from Africa, descended from Africans, people of mixed race, there are freed people, there are people who have escaped, there are people from plantations that failed during this back and forth turmoil, that fled and lived in the jungles. Thousands of people of African descent on this island, and maybe like about 1,000 or so white people, maybe like 2,000, but more than double that people of African descent on Saint Lucia. Quite a lot. And you can hear something a little similar about this if you watch my video on Haiti. It ends quite differently than what happens on Saint Lucia, but the beginning of the situation is quite similar when on Haiti, the people of African descent compared to people of European descent was 10 to 1. They just brought in tons and tons of people from Africa. And, they have children, and they have children, and they have children, and there's a lot of people. So those people are reading these pamphlets from France and reading about the revolution going on over there, thinking, wait a minute, there's way more of us than the slave owners. We can take over. And they sure do. There's a slave revolt inspired by the French Revolution in 1791. And the British, of course, take note of this and realize that their treasured island is in a particular weak spot. I mean, France is in a very weak spot, but their island that they want very much is very, very weak. So on April 1st, 1794, the British come knocking and they invade. And the slaves and freed people, mulattoes, so on and so forth, who have revolted are like, this is our chance, so we're not going to let you take over this island. And they form the L'Armée Française, and they fight back against the British in what was the First Brigand War. The British called them the Brigands. They call themselves the L'Armée Française. And on February 21st, 1795, the rebels win, and they take control of the island, and they kick out the British and most of the slave owners and rich white population of the island. And so begins the L'Année de la Liberté, or the year of freedom, the year of no slavery. And they did manage to import a guillotine from France. So you can imagine what happened to those who did not manage to escape the island. And they must have had a very celebratory year. I know there were some generals that led some governments and, made plans, but it was all ruined in 1796 when the British came back. The Second Brigand War begins. The British were much more prepared this time. They burnt down the city of Castries. The Second War lasts much, much longer, mainly because there are a lot of bumps in the road in between. Mainly the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, which ended the French Revolution and placed Napoleon in power as the Emperor of France. The British gave Saint Lucia back to France in that time, and Napoleon reestablished slavery. So you can imagine how well that went over with the people of Saint Lucia. I'll just say that in 1803, Britain came back and took control of the island again. You can just imagine what happened between 1802 and 1803, that Britain had to come back and, had the ability to take over the island again. In 1804, Britain and France signed the Treaty of Paris, and France gave the island to Britain. I guess they just gave up. Said, just take it. It's fine. And Britain, the island was ceded to Britain in 1814, officially becoming part of Britain. and it has stayed that way ever since. So Britain won. They won the custody battle. A fight they started back in 1635, and they finally stuck it out. That stubbornness. They won it in 1814. Incredibly stubborn. So, and they continued that brigand war until about the 1830s. Of course, the slave trade ended for Britain in 1807. Actual slavery took a lot longer to end. They implemented this service, I suppose, what they considered out of like the kindness of their hearts, where slavery ended, but they could work for a few years as like indentured servants, where they were still doing the same work but for less hours and for some money, so they can like learn how to not be slaves, which nowadays, like, that sounds, I'm not even gonna go there. We're just gonna keep going. You can formulate your own thoughts about that. In 1924, they formed their first constitution, so Britain starting to slowly give Saint Lucia their own independent government, starting to give them their own rights to self-govern. And eventually they would get more and more self-governing powers over time. The only tiny bump in the road was the Battle of the Caribbean in World War II. St. Lucia actually saw combat on March 9th, 1942, when a German U-boat sank 2 British ships in Castries harbor. But that was really the only significant news there. On February 22nd, 1979, St. Lucia got their full independence from Britain, but they remained in the Commonwealth. And then I dug through a lot of, political, economic history of St. Lucia up until modern day, and it was pretty boring. Sorry if you're St. Lucians. It was pretty boring. But that's a good thing. That's a very good thing, because if your politics are super boring, especially in modern day, that's excellent. That means everything's going smoothly and wonderfully, and your country is doing fantastic. So congratulations, St. Lucia, on that. The only really interesting thing I read was about their bananas. So obviously they moved on from sugar and decided that their new big crop was going to be bananas, and they were very profitable with bananas. And nowadays, since about like the 70s, 1980s, they've moved on slowly from bananas to tourism. And for a while it was 50-50, and now they're leaning more toward tourism being profitable than the bananas. And that's the history of St. Lucia. I told you it was a ride. Let's go on to the book and read a bit about this island. Let me put down my pencil and let me zoom out a bit. It's always really difficult to zoom out on this, so let me just very carefully. Oh, see, it zoomed in. All right. Let's read a bit. It doesn't really talk about St. Lucia a lot. I skimmed through, but here's a little map. I read about Grenada in this book, and someone pointed out, who was from Grenada, that there's like a weird, like, mathematical typo. Maybe I'll find it and we'll talk about it. So let's see. Let's find St. Lucia. I know it's on this page. Let's see. The most developed of the Windward Islands is St. Lucia, a haven for tourists. In the center of the St. Lucia stands... I can't talk. In the center of St. Lucia stands Mount Jimmy, towering over the island at 3,117 feet. Gros Piton and Petit Piton, twin volcanic cones, lie in the southwest section of the island. Like the other Windward Islands, St. Lucia is green and fertile, and because it has changed hands between European powers more than a dozen times, it has a fascinating history. Let's see, where else? This has great page sounds too. Plants and animals. St. Dominica. there's not a lot, but Christopher Columbus, who thankfully did not touch this island, just sailed past it. It's of Grenada, which again you should check out. Ooh, Saint Lucia. On Saint Lucia, the native Caribs fiercely resisted both the British and the French until 1660 when they agreed to a treaty with the latter. Over the course of the next century and a half, however, the island changed hands 14 times between the French and the British. Yeah, I didn't talk about them all. I skipped a couple. Like, I didn't even write one down. It was 1788. I think there was another one. It was right after the American Revolution one. Like, I just skipped. It wasn't very exciting. Finally, in 1814, the French ceded control of Saint Lucia to Great Britain. I skipped a few of them. I can't wait to talk about Martinique when we can talk about this volcanic eruption. So talked about the invasion of Grenada. I'm in the middle of another country we're going to talk about next week that the United States invaded as well. So I'm knee-deep in that research. Saint Lucia. Saint Lucia, we're talking about economy. Saint Lucia knows well what can happen when the banana market suffers. Its banana sales have been declining since 1997 because of competition from other countries in Latin America. There are still more than 2,000 banana farmers on the island, however, and they struggle to make a living. Like St. Vincent, St. Lucia is setting its sights on improving tourism on the island, focusing on constructing hotels, restaurants, and other attractions. For the past several years, advances in tourism have helped St. Lucia's GDP grow. St. Lucia is also concentrating on the manufacturing sector and on creating small offshore financial businesses. Let's see, culture and people. See, the Lucians. I've been saying St. Lucians. Is it the Lucians? Anyway. Oh, and it says right here, the renowned poet, playwright, and essayist Derek Walcott was born in St. Lucia in 1930. His works often examined the experiences of Caribbean islanders. In 1992, Walcott received the Nobel Prize in Literature. Awesome. On St. Lucia, home to more than 160,000 people, there is a visible blend of the French and the English. Even though England won final control of the island, the influence of the French culture has endured. English is the main language, and the island's educational, legal, and political structures are based on British models. However, the island's music, dance, and language all resemble France's culture and language. The restaurants in St. Lucia have received wide acclaim, winning several gold medals in important culinary competitions, using some of the island's incredible produce, including papayas, pineapples, passion fruit, and coconuts, and combining it with the day's catch. Cooks create exotic dishes like callaloo soup, which is the national dish. The island's kitchens are also known for their curries and pepper pot stews. Saint Lucia, man, I cannot talk tonight. Saint Lucia is also home to two Nobel Prize winners, Sir W. Arthur Lewis, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1979, and poet and playwright Derek Walcott, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1992. The St. Lucians, I was right, the St. Lucians celebrate the anniversary of their independence on February 22nd. In December, they celebrate their National Day with sailboat races and parties. The biggest holiday, however, is Carnival, the pre-Lenten festival with parades, costumes, and music in the streets. I feel like I should go to. I've never been to any kind of carnival celebration. I feel like I should. Oh, there's the pitons I was telling you about. So you can see the big conical volcano shapes. The landmark Piton, twin volcanic peaks rising out of the cobalt blue Caribbean, tower over the French colonial town of So look, so the town, I speak French, so I would say this as Soufriere, but they don't pronounce it like that because when the British took over, they just mispronounce everything. So I think it's Soufriere, I believe. It's a problem if I ever visit. I'm not gonna be able to say anything right. Soufriere. I don't know. I don't want to mispronounce it. But it's Soufriere in French, so. Anyway, beautiful volcanoes, like the biggest landmark in Saint Lucia. Cities and towns in Saint Lucia. Located in the northwestern portion of Saint Lucia is the capital city of Castries. It was named after Marechal de Castries, a French colonial minister who governed the island in the late 1700s. 1/3 of St. Lucia's 160,000 plus residents live in Castries. Some don't consider it a particularly pretty town with its modern concrete and functional architecture. Castries has a history of burning down, with disasters occurring in 1796, 1812, 1927, and 1948. As with other island towns, the busiest place in Castries is the market. It is a confusing and colorful jumble of furniture, food, and straw bags. The two fishing towns of Ons-le-Rey and Canaries lie to the south and are stopping points on the way to the town of, I'm just going to say it, Soufriere, one of the oldest settlements on the entire island. At Gros-Islet, near the northern tip of the island, loud parties on Friday nights will sometimes last until the morning. I think that might be it. Yeah. You can see the St. Lucia flag. Very beautiful. And some recipes in the back. But I don't want to get hungry, so that looks like it. So, thank you so much for joining me. This book is gigantic. You can see some of the other islands here. So I thought about doing like a flip through when I first ordered it to show you guys, but this book is almost as big as my desk, so I would have to do even further back of a scale than what I do for my language videos to get it all in frame. So I would have to figure out how to set up that shot in my little studio apartment. So that will be a challenge. But I love this book. I'm going to show you more of it. The next country we're going to do, I think, is about the same size as St. Lucia. Maybe it's a little bigger, actually. Yeah, I think it's a little bigger than St. Lucia. But it's, very small still. So we'll see this book again in a few days. So I can't wait to show you. I can't wait to show off this book even more. This book has maps of the moon and Mars too. It's awesome. I'm so glad I got it. But anyway, I'm going to leave you for the night. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something interesting, and I hope that this video was very relaxing. I hope you're asleep right now and not even taking in a word that I'm saying. But if you are, go ahead and leave a comment. And be sure to leave a like too, because I love getting likes almost as much as I like getting comments. Likes always make me smile. Thanks again for watching, and have a good night.